Hey friends, I got a really cool message from our friend Austin Foss over at Pops and Bijou Games. First, he said he's getting married to his partner of 7 years, so we love to see it. Second, he let me know that Pops and Bijou is coming out with their newest game, Vicious Gardens, this spring. If you are into gardening and take that games, this is perfect for you. Also, the art and the aesthetic, gorgeous. You can go to play.viciousgardens.com to sign up, get notified, and congratulations, Austin. We're wishing you all the best. Hey friends, I'm Maxwell Freud, a queer Minneapolis-based game designer and the host of Hatch This Way, a limited audio series where I chat with other queer folks in the tabletop industry to learn all about who they are and how they contribute to the hobby by being their authentic selves. And today I am joined by Jamie Sabriel of Triple Rainbow Games. Jamie, how are you doing?
Hi. Oh, I'm so good. Thank you for having me.
You are so excited.
I am so excited. Isn't that nice?
It's been one
purpose.
of my...
I'm not even being paid extra for it.
Oh, yes. Nobody was paid in the making.
Yeah.
No one. If anything, I should be paying you way more. I don't know. So first question, how do you identify?
Oh, so I am queer and non-binary. And I use they, them pronouns. And that's basically it. I really like vague umbrella terms. You're going to hear that a lot. I like to use the vaguest, most umbrella terms possible because I started identifying this way to escape boxes, and I found that sometimes it's all too easy to jump from the heteronormative boxes into the queer normative boxes, which are also stifling at times. So I like to be as vague as possible.
Yeah, they work for some people, and for some people, they don't. And that's okay. We don't have to put everyone in a tiny box. It can just be whatever they want. And that's okay.
Labels are shortcuts, and shortcuts are really handy sometimes and really stifling sometimes.
Talk to me a little bit about your journey of discovery of landing on your very vague identities.
Oh, so, okay. Little tiny baby Jamie. Before kindergarten, I'm now walking and talking. Literally all I do every day is steal my mom's shoes and try to walk around in her high heels and steal her glasses and push the baby carriage around, which I grew up in a conservative household and with people who are not very versed in queer culture or norms, and also were mean about it. And so we're like, no, you can't play with dolls. You have to play with cars and stuff and boy things. But literally all I wanted to do was play house and be the mommy and all this other stuff. And then much later, I figured out that was like the first of many clues. What was another one? So the other big one when I look back is when I started hitting puberty, my voice started getting deeper, like it does. And I had almost like a Barry White voice. Like it went way deep, like scary deep. And 11-year-old me, I had no idea what queer culture was because I was raised in this like very heteronormative household. But even before that, I just like subconsciously was pitching my voice up because I was like, this doesn't sound like me. This isn't what I should sound like. This is weird. And so I kept pitching my voice up on purpose until I was like out of breath and losing my voice and stuff. And to the point where I stretched my vocal cords to be what it sounds like now, which is more gender neutral. I realized much later on that I was like purposefully trying to make myself sound more androgynous. And then, yeah, this is related to dead name stuff. And I don't want to, people can make assumptions. I'll let people add 2 and 2 together to make 4. So my name wasn't always Jamie. Spoiler alert.
Because you said baby Jamie. And I was like, oh, were you always Jamie then?
No, That's me correcting it in retrospect. So I was not always Jamie. My whole life I've lived in like the Boston area. And so in Boston, there's a big burlesque scene. And so when I was in high school, and then like very early college, I was in the professional Magic the Gathering scene. Like that was my big thing. And this is actually how I got into board game design, but I'll talk about that later. Which a lot of white dudes in the pro Magic scene, many people who try to play competitive Magic, white dudes, white guys. So I felt weird, like I didn't quite fit in. And this is another clue of like, I'm sure there's something up here, but I haven't figured it out yet. And then when I was about 20, I think, 21 or so, after I'm out of college at this point, and I go to my first burlesque show, and I'm like, this is my people. Now I understand. Oh my God, it's a whole new world. And I met all these people who were in the audience also seeing the show. And I'm this like bubbly, cute, but burgeoning queer, not really knowing it yet. And like all this other stuff. And I was starting to figure it out at that point, but I was way behind. And so the first person I introduced myself to after the show, I was like, oh yeah, I'm this name. And stuff like that. And she goes, "You don't really seem like this name. You seem more like a Jamie. Is it okay if I call you Jamie?" And I'm like, yes, I've wanted people to call me Jamie for like a year, and I didn't express it well enough. And so people were just like, no, we're just going to call you insert dead name here, because that's what we always did. And that's what you introduced yourself as. And I was like, okay. And so that gave me the courage to start calling myself Jamie. And then about 6 years ago for my birthday, I legally changed it to Jamie Sabriel Flez. And yeah, I was so clueless. I forgot to mention this as part of the like timeline, but when I was a senior in high school, I had a coming out party, and everyone already knew I was queer except me, because this is again before I knew the whole spectrum, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm bisexual because that's the only thing that makes sense in terms of like how I've thought about gender, because your gender's locked in, and so it must be bisexuality. And so I started inviting people to my coming out party, and I was like, I have something to tell you, I'm coming out, here's the invitation to my coming out party. And they're like, I know. What? So I was the last person to find out about me being queer. It's one of those stories. So yeah, the burlesque scene is really what kicked it off, and me just talking about it, because in Boston, the burlesque scene, at least at the time, I don't know if it's still the case now, but at the time it's like 80% overlap with the burner scene, which is 80% overlap of almost everyone in the scene is queer and has their own different stories. And so I was just thrust into this world of people who are like much more open and expressive about the vast array of different identities one can be. And it was the first time someone introduced themselves to me and they corrected me on their pronouns. I was like, wait, what? You can use neutral what? That's a thing. I like went home and like cried tears of joy. I was like, that's a thing. That's a thing that people do. And that's when I started using pronouns. It was like another burlesque show, I think like my 6th or 7th one, and I finally met someone who was non-binary, and it just blew my mind. And it made everything click.
Yeah.
It made most things click. So those are the broad strokes. I'm sure there's a ton of finer details I'm missing, but those are the broad strokes. I forget some of it at this point now. It's been a while.
No, I don't think I've ever met someone who had like a literal coming out party. That's wild.
It was
you said you were
basically just a party.
Senior in college or senior in high school?
Yeah.
High
so I was
school.
like 17 or 18 at the time, going around telling all my friends who already knew I was queer that I was queer.
But your family didn't either. So was
oh no, it was at someone else's house, because my family would have disowned me, and in fact later on they did, but that's a whole different thing. Family, not so fun. Not so fun on that end.
So when you changed your name, you changed your entire name, I did. Assuming?
Yep.
I have
First, middle, and last.
I have a couple friends who have done that.
Yeah.
For various reasons.
My name fit me 0%, my old name. This name fits me much better.
No, that's awesome. You can draw the line wherever you want, but I'm interested in learning more about your family to whatever level you're comfortable. Like one of the intended audiences is cis-het families who don't have a reference. So you don't have to go into specifics, but just talk to me a little bit about, I don't know, what was that like for you? I assume you have to go. It's like finding a new family, right?
Yeah. So to talk about, I have an idea on how to talk about my biological family, which is what I wished happened. So,
oh yeah, no, for sure.
The last time I interacted with my family, it was to tell them about my name change. So so at this point, yeah, it was probably like 7 or 8 years ago. So it was to tell them about my name change. It went really poorly. And part of that is I expected that because of how poorly everything else went. And I really just, all I wanted was for them to just be more open-minded, be accepting of change. Like, you can't directly control what other people do, even if they're related to you by blood, especially if they're related to you by blood. Just so good at getting under each other's skin. If you're related by blood, as I'm sure everyone listening can relate to. And so I received a lot of, no, you are supposed to be this because we have such high hopes for you and your future. Like, you are the hope of this family. A lot of pressure, lots of pressure. I have 2 older sisters, and both of my older sisters are like high school dropouts, and I guess they were. I don't know what the story is now. But yeah, so all of the pressure was on me to go to college and get a high paying job and don't be a mess up and like all this other stuff. And it's like, but what if I just wanted to live my life the way I wanted to live my life? What about that? What if I wanted to live the life of an honest queer as opposed to a lying cishet person? So yeah, basically, I just wish that they were willing to listen and understand that just because they saw me a specific way did not mean I saw myself the same way. So to anyone listening, if someone tells you something is different with them, please pay attention to that.
Yeah, I just talked to my last guests about expectations. While we were talking, I was like, I think that's really what coming out is, that re-establishment of what expectations were of you as a person. Like, I know you expected this, but we need to redefine what those expectations are. And that's what this conversation is. It's me telling you that what you thought is different than what things are. I think that's what coming out is. And I think, because I remember my sister asking me, why do people still have to come out? That's so weird. And I'm like, it's not because we want to. It's because you straight people just project all these expectations of what they think people should be like and do. And they have kids and they project it all on the kids. And we have to come out because sometimes we don't go the way you expected us to go. And so that's coming out is
right. And in a sense, I actually, to loop back to the labels conversation, I think that's why I have gravitated towards using as vague a labeling methodology as possible, because saying certain words carries expectations with it, even in the queer circles. So saying I'm trans, while true, carries implications about, like, how long have you been doing HRT and when is your sexual reassignment surgery? And I'm like, not everyone who's trans does everything that you might expect a trans person to do. Stuff like that. And people have legit asked me like, oh, okay, so you're trans, so should I use she, her pronouns for you? And I was like, I literally just told you that I use they, them pronouns. No. So it's a whole thing. Expectations are the killer. But I don't really see a way to be like expectationless either. It's just a matter of wielding them responsibly, I think.
I think you said it's just being open to it. If we have to correct expectations, it's like correcting pronouns or whatever, or changing assumptions of like, no, I don't have a wife. Thank you for asking that very pointed question. I get it all. They're like, oh, so do you have a girlfriend? I'm like, no. Now we're both about to be very uncomfortable. Well, maybe not so much me, but you for sure.
I don't care. I revel in making straight people uncomfortable.
Yes, I will just scream it out here.
Oh my God. I'm at the point where I think I'm allergic to straight people. When I get asked questions like that, I just break out into hives.
Oh God. I just saw a post of a trans person was like, me saying I'm trans, and then straight person asking obligatory questions. Like, oh my God. When did you change? What genitals do you have? And
oh my God,
genitals later.
Being asked about genitals, I didn't understand how frequently it happens. So I did stand-up comedy on and off for a decade, and so it was like before and after coming out as non-binary to the world. And in the after phase, almost every single time, I had two people, like 95% of comedians that I interacted with over like the 4 years that I tried to be a stand-up comedian fell into two camps. One is they, them pronouns aren't a real thing. And the other was, what's in your pants? Legit asking me like, oh, like what genitalia do you have? I have been asked that directly phrased as such by multiple people in the stand-up community sphere.
Yeah, I imagine it's like a very certain personality that goes into that. But are they going for like kind of like shock effect and they're just kind of programmed for that? I don't know. I know
a lot of them were
regular
just
people, non-comedians, I'm sure also say that in the same way. Yeah, I don't know why they go there. I'm like, it's really none of your business. Is it uncomfortable for you that you don't know? Is the question really, should I be attracted to you? Is that what they're asking? But
yeah, exactly. Like, yes. In fact, it's funny you mentioned that. If I'm feeling feisty, I will say something like, oh, whatever you're most attracted to. Just imagine that. But often the more calm version of my go-to response is, do you ask everybody about their genitalia, or is it just me because you're confused by me? And if I'm feeling really feisty, I'll start interrogating them about theirs in response, not answer the question, just dig in and go after them. And I've had people like, oh my God, and walk away. And I'm like, you think about what you just said to me now. You think about that. Now that I've asked you 15 questions, detailed, pointed questions about what's in your pants.
Yeah, in my D&D group, we have a standing joke where someone was holding a rod, and they're like, describe the rod. And we're all queer in the group. So every time I'm always like, describe the rod, whenever we need more details for anything. And it's always a euphemism. In case there was any ambiguity, it's a euphemism every time. Every time you meet an NPC, describe the rod.
What is a queer D&D game if not a euphemism?
It really is. It's how we exist comfortably together.
Yeah. I know several happy married couples that met through queer D&D games. And this is just why online dating when instead D&D.
It's a big commitment, though. A whole session, even a one shot's going to take a hot second. But I guess you can always
a
walk
relationship.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, some queer relationships shorter than D&D campaigns.
Oh, been there.
We could dig into that too if you want. What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about, there's a thing that I've vented about a few times, and I haven't really gotten like closure on it. This happened like a year ago, and I still don't have closure.
I can't promise you closure, but I can promise you that I will listen to all of it.
It is a queer game experience thing. So I am a game designer as well. I am a designer of board games. And my game is in the fighting game sphere. We can talk about it later if people are interested. But basically, it is essentially in the fighting game sphere, the 2-player like dual fighting game. And so I try to play everyone else's games that are in this genre because I'm very well versed in it and I can give a lot of great feedback. And I sit down at a virtual playtest for this other game that is in the fighting game genre. And the person who is the designer is a white man. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever, that's fine. I can coexist with you peacefully if you're not mean to me, in theory. And so I sit down at this table with my friend Jay. Oh, my friend Jay. I love Jay. Jay is awesome. The designer, I won't name, but not a friend of mine. First time meeting them.
Okay.
And they're like, okay, cool. So he, the designer, is saying, here's my game, so on and so forth. Pick a character. First thing I say immediately is, I'm non-binary. Do you have any queer characters? Do you have any LGBTQ representation in your cast? And he immediately goes, actually, yes, I do have a non-binary character. And I said, great, I'll play that one. Cool. And he was like, it's a little more complicated, but you're also a designer in this sphere. You're probably going to handle it just fine. I said, okay, cool, great. Yes, give me the character. And I play the character. And the game is heavy. It's a heavy game, more complex. Takes a little over an hour to play the game. There's a lot of stuff going on. Card-based fighting game, and every card, it's modeled after Super Smash Brothers in some ways that are awesome and some ways where it shouldn't be. Something about Super Smash Brothers is you can hit A to attack, that's your basic attack, and you can input any direction, like up, down, left, or right, to do a different attack. And the cards were mimicking that by all having 4 different things they could do. And it's like, all right, cool. So I have 7 cards in my hand, which is really 28 cards because they can each be played 4 different ways, which is a lot. But here's the thing. A bit of the flavor text misgendered. Not a super big deal. It's a prototype that can get ironed out. Here's the bigger issue. Literally every single time the designer referenced either the character that they designed or me, it was with male pronouns and not they, them pronouns. And at the end of the session, I talked about it and was like, this is not okay. Especially since, think about, if you are presenting this game at a convention, which turns out he did multiple times, if someone's first experience seeing a non-binary anything is this character in your game and you proceed to misgender them every single time, that says to the people playing the game that these are not important things. When the entire point of putting a non-binary character in your game is to add to that representation and do something good in the world, and you're doing the opposite. And so I gave him that feedback, and then he went and played my game and tore it asunder, which I think was because they were just very mad about all the mean quote unquote stuff that I said about how terribly they were doing at being an ally, because they weren't. They were being an enemy. And I still think about it sometimes and get mad. And I've told a bunch of people this story and they're just like, oh man, that sucks. And I'm like, cool, do you have any actionable advice for me? Because I think that's really what I need. So when I say maybe I can get some closure, not that I'm expecting you to just fix all these problems, but maybe you can at least commiserate with me, because that's messed up and I'm still mad about it.
Yeah, I think it's been an exhausting aspect of getting into the hobby, and it's not unique to this hobby, but I've run into it several times where people who are quote unquote allies also want to battle me on whether or not I'm actually an ally. And I'm like, you're coming after me. I had a specific instance when somebody shared a Harry Potter review for a Harry Potter game during Pride, and I was like, you know what? There are other things.
A little bit tone
like,
deaf.
Very tone deaf. And I just don't support it, period. And I'm like, I don't think this is the best choice specifically for Pride. And then in general, I don't really stand this. Just letting you know, like putting out there. And then this person had to come in and be like, you're a hypocrite. Do you shop at Barnes and Noble? And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, so that
started attacking me. And they're like, I'm an ally. And I'm like, you're literally attacking a queer person trying to raise issue that had nothing to do with you. I'm like, I don't want you to be my ally. That's right. Like, I don't need your support. Thank you.
Yeah, here's the thing about the term ally. Ally is not a thing that you call yourself. It is a thing that other people call you. You self-identifying as an ally is a red flag to all queer people. Don't do it. Just be good. And other people will introduce you as an ally, and then boom, now you're an ally. That's my hot take on the word ally. I don't like it. I also don't like it when people are like, you look at the extension of LGBTQIA, and people are like, oh, A stands for ally. No, it does not. It doesn't. Ally, very appreciated when you're not espousing how much of an ally you are to other people, because that doesn't make you an ally. That makes you attention-y anyway. But yeah, oh my God.
It's performative. It's
performative. You know, yes, that's the term I was looking for.
It sounds great to say.
Yeah. It is a really fun word to say. Also, a fun little fact about Harry Potter, if it makes you feel any better, pretty much none of the stars of the Harry Potter movie agree with J.K. Rowling. And I forget exactly what the situation was, but the main three, so Daniel Radcliffe and Rupert Grint and Emma Watson. So the three of them were like being interviewed on a thing. And I think it was during Pride Month or something. And I forget when it was. Every time they were asked about J.K. Rowling, and it was soon after the J.K. Rowling stuff, or like anytime they were asked about Harry Potter and not like the other stuff that they were working on, they started every single answer that they had. They like looked into the camera and were like, trans rights are human rights. And then they answered the question. And they just did that like a dozen times or so. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. And they all tweeted about it like basically immediately, like, JK, what are you talking about? Like, we're stars of Harry Potter and we can still love Harry Potter, but also trans people. We love trans people more than we love Harry Potter. So don't worry, trans people, we got you.
Can't really separate themselves.
No, it's
from, like, they will always be huge. Those characters.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I didn't really think about stars who have to go through that until Harry Potter, because that's like the big one for my generation. Like Emma Watson escaping Hermione Granger identity. It's wild. Yeah. And I don't know if you heard about how she got bullied at Brown for it. A friend of mine was in classes with her at Brown, and like every time she answered a question, someone was like, oh, 10 points for Gryffindor. And she's like, come on, I'm just trying to learn things.
Literally. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. I'm hoping that through this, it just raises awareness of things like that to people. And I think you'll never get closure. I think ideally it would be great to have someone else stepping in to educate them. And I think it's exhausting as queer people to constantly have to. What would it mean to you if someone else jumped in and said, hey, that's not their pronouns. You're doing this wrong. You need to do better.
I'm glad you brought this up. Here is a common, I can't speak for all queer people. I don't want to try to do that, but I will speak for me. A lot of people who want to be good allies assume, and this is a very fair assumption, I don't want to speak for you. If you're being I don't know how you want to handle this because I don't know what's going on in your brain and I don't want to disrespect you, which is cool. But oh my God, I have to correct people all the time. Please help me. Because like you mentioned, it gets so exhausting having to do it all the time. And I love it when friends of mine win the race and beat me to it, because I have to be like on guard all the time, I feel, and it's so tiring. Oh God. So having friends around that are like, stop it, without me having to say stop it, oh my God, it's so good. It's also, there's this weird phenomenon where when it's someone else, it has this weird psychological effect of adding legitimacy to the claim, where it's like it has someone corroborating it like a fact, because one person saying something, that could be anything, but if two people say it, now it's a lot more believable, which it sucks that our weird primal lizard brains work that way, but they do. And so I guess take advantage of that and stick up for your queer friends and correct people on their pronouns, because I have at no point interacted with a queer person who would not appreciate that. Again, just from my experience, and I can't speak for all queer people, but if I roll up to a queer space and there's someone who's just not getting it, my friend correcting them is, oh yeah, this is a normal thing here. But if someone is living somewhere where being trans is illegal, you might not want your friends shouting to the rooftops that you're trans every time someone misgenders you. So I'm sure there are contexts. It's just in my own personal little bubble every single time, even if it's someone where it's assigned female at birth and they use like she, they pronouns, and someone just keeps saying she because they're assuming and they didn't ask or whatever. Someone jumping in and being like, they. Like, even that I've seen be appreciated. So,
no, for sure. I think, yeah, I've talked about this too. Like, in my little first episode that I recorded, I talked about how I was doing a show, and then one of the kids in the show, they mentioned something about they saw two guys kissing outside, and they made a big deal about it. And then I didn't know what to say because I'm like, what do I say to this kid? I should just be like, hey, kid, what's going on? Have a conversation with them. But I froze up because I didn't want to get yelled at by anyone for being that person who was indoctrinating their children or something. Like, not that that's a rational thought at any point, but I think my defense mechanism is to be quiet. And I just went there. So when someone else stepped in, a guy, adult, stepped in and said, he did that for me. So I didn't even have to like out myself to that kid. Not that I was in the closet or anything, but just like in that moment, I wasn't
doing this
like,
podcast. I don't think you're in the closet.
Yeah.
Much of anyone.
I just had this like fear response, and it took a ton of pressure off me for having a different adult step in and then have that conversation with that child about like, why is that a big deal? He just like questioned him in a very reassuring way. So he handled it very well, and I just didn't know what to do. So I appreciated having someone step in for me in that instance. And
yeah, for sure.
It says a lot. I felt so much safer knowing that I didn't have to have those conversations with people, because I'm also always like, I think I'm ready for it. Like in my brain, I think I can walk into a room and someone says something homophobic or ignorant. I can be like, let me tell you. But then it turns out I'm actually very anti-conflict. So when it happens, I'm like, oh, I don't want conflict. So
yeah, I'm not anti-conflict. I'm the opposite. I'm pro-conflict, has a kind of a weird ring to it, but I'm not shy about spit and fire if spitting fire is necessary. And my thing is that, so in terms of the freeze response, that's how I deal with literally any time I have to interact with any child at all. I'm just so terrified of interacting with children because anything I say or don't do could be like permanently embedded in their brain because their brains are still forming. And so I just make it a point to not interact with anyone under the age of 26 whenever possible. It's like, all right, cool. Your brain's done. Good. Now I'll say words.
Oh gosh. No, I get that, but I do enjoy mentoring, and I don't know, I want to be a role model for the smaller developing people. But
same.
Yeah, it's very scary. It's a lot of pressure to be like, what if I'm the sole queer person they run into in their lives and they hate me?
You've ruined it for all of us. You spoiled the impression of queer people. Oh man,
set the
just
whole
like
country
that
back
designer.
again.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I think it sounds like we're mentoring like the same demographic of people, because that's my favorite type of person to mentor too. You want to talk about publishing a game? I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. I have many knowledge points that I have not put into practice yet. But you want to talk about designing a game? Oh boy, I've designed some games. I can design a game or 9. That's a thing that I've done. And so I'm a big fan of nurturing those beginning baby designers and helping them get more confident and stuff. And even with that, it is still terrifying, even though they're adults that I'm talking to. But yeah, tabletop mentorship program did have some young kids sign up, and I was like, I love that this is happening, and I could not mentor these people. I would be terrified every single time I say anything.
Oh, I've mentored children since middle school. I think I was a mentor, and then I kept doing it in high school and I did it in college. So I've worked with a lot of kids. I think they're really amazing people, but they also terrify me at the same time.
Yes, I don't hate kids. I think kids are awesome, and kids are the future. I'm just terrified of interacting with them. Just to clarify, I am not anti-kid. I'm very pro.
Kids are
cool.
They will let you know where they're at all the time.
Yeah. It's funny. The last time I interacted, I had this weird interaction where, so I was demoing my game at Boston Fig, and the entire cast of my game is queer. And so someone was like asking me questions about my game, and it's like, okay, cool. What's your game about? I was like, here's the game, here's the stuff, here's why it's cool, all this other stuff. And then after a couple of like back and forth sections, I was like, oh yeah. And the other rad thing about the cast is that everyone is queer, which is not a thing in this space. And they go, okay, what does queer mean? And then their dad like walked in the frame and was like, this is a good learning opportunity for my son who's 14, and just said it that way and started explaining it. And I was like, oh no, this is weird. I don't know what to do. Thank you for saving me. Oh my God. I panicked. I choked. I was like, good to see you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. When I've always mentored kids, I'm a filmmaker. So in college, I specifically mentored kids in filmmaking. So we like made projects together. I've never really had like a queer conversation with a kid, honestly. So that's like new territory for me, is talking to kids about being queer. I've never done that.
I don't even know how to do it. The only conversations I've had were like they must have been like 5 or 6, and they saw me wearing a dress and they were like, why is that boy wearing a dress? And then me being like, and just like glaring at the parent, and the parent being like, shrug. That's about as close as I've come to having a queer conversation with. And also this thing when I demoed my game, but as soon as the dad walked in, I just said no more words. I didn't know what to do.
No, wild. Yeah, I don't know what else to tell people about being terrible allies either. I don't know. I say it at the end. I say the best way to be an ally is to keep learning and listening. I
100%.
stand by that.
Oh yeah.
I think lately I've been encouraging people to be more active, though, if they want to be an ally and to help make spaces safe. You need to be active. You can't be complicit. I haven't asked anyone lately in this set of interviews of what do you say to the people who like, I'm just here to have fun, I'm not here to get political comments.
Oh my God. Especially after all the TTS nonsense.
Yeah.
Boy, did I hear that. So one of the many things that I do in this sphere, I'm one of the moderators of Break My Game, which is the largest online worldwide playtesting board game Discord server. That was the words are generally in an order that makes sense as opposed to what I just said, but I'm sticking with it. And so we were in full support of Zoe and all the stuff that happened, and banned TTS outright from the server. And so we had a lot of pushback on that. And we got some people that were talking about, I'm just here to have fun, and not like, why are politics entering into this and stuff like that. Here's the thing. Everything is political. There's nothing that's not political in some way. Social politics, local politics, global politics, they're always everywhere. And I used to self-identify as apolitical back when I thought that was a good way to identify. Turns out it's not, because that in and of itself is a political statement. And I am like quite political agnostic in terms of global politics, simply because there's a lot that I don't understand, and I'm not going to like espouse strong opinions about things that I have no clue about. So I still have a lot of learning to do there. But yeah, apolitical is different from just being ignorant. And there's nothing wrong with being ignorant. There's nothing wrong with learning. But trying to separate out politics from basically anything is a fool's errand, because it's not really a thing you can do, because we're all formed by social politics over time and presently and in the future.
Yeah. What I've been saying over and over is that games are great to bring people together. I don't think that means there's no space to have these conversations and get to know each other as human beings. Yes, we're here to play a game. That doesn't mean we can't take time to actually connect with people. And if you're like, oh, I want to connect with you, but don't tell me your orientation or identity, that's not a part of my game experience.
If you are playing a game with me, it is, because that is part of my experience.
Then you don't really want to get to know me. Then you're saying one thing and doing another thing. You're not doing the thing that you want to do. You're making me feel very excluded, actually, by saying, don't bring yourself to my table. I just want your physical meat sack to just move the pieces so I can have a good time.
But I can't have a good time if somebody else...
I'm not having a good time.
Yeah.
I spent too many years in the closet to come here and listen to that nonsense.
And I'll be damned if I get shoved back in that closet.
Absolutely not. I'm not here to let you rebuild my door, sir.
So back to being an ally is like making sure spaces that are unwelcome become more welcoming for us queer folks who have to fight against the tide all day, every day.
So was Magic your just main, you like Magic, and then you're like, I can make games like Magic? I'm assuming you're like, oh, I love thinking about how to do this really well. You know, like, turns out I'm really good at thinking about to do this thing really well. I could make my own game that's does the things that I want to see in the game, and then you do that, and then you get into design world, and you're like, oh, there's all these games, and I want to make all the games, something like that. That's
So
maybe
yes, but if you think about a formula in parentheses, the things that you've named are the 2 parentheses on the left and right, but you skipped all the middle bit, which is where the fun is, I think. So
okay, yes, fill me in. Sorry, I tried to
try to put me in a box.
Too unique.
So I've heard that before. I heard that on a date once. That was a funny time. That date did not go well. So yes, I played competitive Magic on and off for a very long time. And the way that I got into hobby board games, so this is like my introduction to board games that aren't like Monopoly, Risk, Clue, the things that we all grow up with. So we're playing Magic, right? And it's okay, cool. I'm in this draft. Oh, I lost round 1. I scrubbed out of the tournament, but I want to keep hanging out and chilling with my friends. So someone is like, oh, have you heard of this game Dominion? No, I haven't heard of Dominion. What's Dominion? Taught me how to play Dominion. I'm like, this is rad. It's a board game, and all the game is in the box, and it's not like Magic, because Magic is a collectible card game, and I still loved Magic at the time. I still love Magic now, but I love casual Magic. I don't love collecting the cards. That lost its appeal long ago. Wheeling and dealing and spending all that money. Yes, once you have to pay bills, it becomes much less exciting.
A little sparkle wears off, in my opinion.
And so I was like, this is so rad that people can make new board games. It's just not even a thing that I thought about critically until seeing Dominion. And then after Dominion, it was like followed hot on the heels of what are now the new batch of classics, quote unquote. So Settlers of Catan, Agricola, Carcassonne, stuff like that.
Ticket to Ride has its.
Yep. Yeah, Ticket to Ride, 100%. King Domino was another one. Yeah, there were a bunch. Yeah. There were like about a dozen. I'm like, this is awesome. And it got to the point, like I slowly transitioned away from going to Magic tournaments and going to the Magic tournament night to go play board games all night instead. And I'm like, this is amazing. Oh my God. Oh, and the game store that I play at sells these games, and thus the addiction began. The very first game that I bought for myself was Ascension, because it turns out I love deck builder games and I love card games, and that part I knew. And here's another thing. I also love video games. So this is a separate track that's going to converge with the previous track. I love video games. And when I was growing up, I loved them more than they loved me. Things like platformers, Mario games, Mario Kart, Super Smash Brothers. I was huge into the first Super Smash Brothers. I tried to play the second one, and I was not at all good enough at the technical proficiency. And I got really frustrated, and I was like, okay, this is too hard, which is a bummer because I love Super Smash Brothers. And I love diving deep into the minutia of stuff like that, systems, and learning how to hack games and speed run platformers and play super difficult mods of games is a thing that I did a lot in my earlier years, and now more in my later years too. This coincides like about a year down the line of me starting my board game track, where a friend of mine is like, I know you really like Super Smash Brothers. Picture this, a board game that is a fighting game. And I'm like, say what? And he pulls out BattleCon. I'm like, this is very cool. I am going to buy it. And so I bought it, and then I played it with my best friend Anders, who I'm naming because he's going to come into the story a little bit later. And we basically only played BattleCon for a summer. And then eventually we were like, this is not the experience that we want for a number of reasons. And this is what got me started on my game design journey as an adult. There are other pieces of the game design journey as a child where I always knew I wanted to design games. The very first game I designed, I was 4 years old, and it took an entire summer before leading up to kindergarten. So my parents were totally cool with it because I didn't make a peep. I just designed this game. I watched them play Super Mario Brothers 3, and I recreated the entire experience in construction paper and pencils and like drawing the little hot line. It was a mess. So that was the first game I designed. And then I took a break because Magic was like my game design brain being tapped into, which I didn't realize until later on. Like the building of decks and testing and iterating decks was like my favorite thing, turns out, because I'm a game designer with the game design brain. So fast forward back to the thing I was talking about before, fighting game. And Anders and I analyzed like, okay, cool. This is not the experience we're looking for. It doesn't have that Super Smash Brothers feel. It doesn't have that feel of playing a fighting game because you plan like for 15 minutes, you have to analyze all the information, and then actually resolving a turn takes about 30 seconds after you reveal what attack you and your opponent played. And then half the time you don't even get to do anything if you're second because you got stunned and you didn't have the stun guard stat high enough and all this other stuff. And so it was just, there were a lot of really unfun moments.
Yeah, can I just say BattleCon is probably one of my top 3 games, but
Wow.
for me it feels real time because that's about how fast my brain works. So I think it's the greatest thing. I think normal people are probably like, this is a very slow fighting game.
So here's the thing. All right, so first of all, normal people don't exist. Logical fallacy. Normal people aren't real.
Yeah.
So I can think really quickly with the things that I'm good at thinking about quickly. The thing that I don't like is having to analyze all of my opponent's moves. But one of the things that I did realize, and I find out the term for this until much later on, Yomi style games, because I don't like multiplayer Magic. I always liked the 2-player Magic, because part of reading your opponent and like being able to anticipate what they're doing and not having other people to worry about and stuff like that, I really love that. And the levels of Yomi, which read about Yomi, people listening, it would be too long to get into here. But basically it's like the rock, paper, scissors thing of, oh, you're going to throw scissors, so I'm going to throw rock. I'm going to throw rock because you know that I'm thinking you're going to throw scissors, so I'm going to throw paper. But then if I know you're going to do that, I'm going to throw scissors. And those are the levels of Yomi. And I love it because if you and your opponent are at the same level, you're evenly matched. And if one of you is one level higher than the other, you're outmatching them. But if you're 2 or more levels higher than them, you're outmatching yourself. You've thought yourself into a corner and you're overthinking it, and you'll lose that way too, which is awesome. It never gets old. Anyway,
it's the scene from Princess Bride, if anyone is familiar.
Yes, the scene from Princess Bride with the poisons. Yeah. It's the scene with the poison cups. That's just the best example.
It really is. It really is just a masterclass of.
Yes, and I keep forgetting to say it when people ask what Yomi is. So that's really okay. I'll just link people to that video.
Yes.
So I played a lot of BattleCon and I analyzed the heck out of BattleCon. And I was like, BattleCon is really rad for the people that are super into it. And so that's the thing is like, I know for a fact that if I got super into BattleCon, then playing with other people that are super into BattleCon, a game would take 1/5 of the time. And I know that because I went on a quest to find and play all the other fighting card games that I could find. And none of them delivered the experience I was looking for. And so then I said to myself, why don't I just make my own? As a parallel to this, I had already started designing games just for fun. I wasn't aspiring to publish a game. I was just like, I just want to design a game I never want to stop playing. Because Dominion I eventually got sick of. Agricola I can't play too many times in a row. It loses the magic. And I wanted to see if there was a game that I would never lose the magic of. I had high hopes for BattleCon, but I ended up stepping away from it. And so after about a dozen prototypes of me not super loving it and this like post BattleCon, post other fighting games experience, it all coalesced into this one day where I designed the first prototype for my game Fight Sequence. And I was like, I have struck gold. This is exactly what I wanted. I never want to stop playing Fight Sequence. And that's naturally like how the development cycle of Fight Sequence started. And now we're 4 years later. And now it's like actually a thing. I'm trying to get it out into the world and publishing it and doing all that stuff, which is not really a thing I cared about as much until Fight Sequence rolled along. That is my game design journey path. And it's cool that we overlap in BattleCon land. So you'll probably like my game then. If you like BattleCon.
For sure. Yeah, that's the thing
about
BattleCon.
It's more casual, quote unquote, but it's no less strategic.
Yeah, the thing about BattleCon is that, like you said, and I think Pixel Tactics is a similar game. It's the same level 99 as the publisher for both of those.
Yes,
but you need to find someone who likes that game. I think a lot of their games, you just need to find someone else who likes it. Yeah, and then they need to dig into it. That's their whole. They put so much game into every title they release. We played Argent of the Consortium for the first time.
Oh my god!
Last night, and I'm like, there's so much game. Like we played one side of the cards. There's a whole other side of the cards. It's completely same game, but plays completely differently. I was like, this is so much, so many options.
I have not played a game that has made me more infuriated than Argent of the Consortium. That is the game that has forever cemented itself in my brain because I refuse to play Diplomacy or Twilight Imperium. I know that I would go insane if I played those. So it's Argent of the Consortium. It's my like death knell game. But yeah, level 99. So this is one of my favorite things about board games And video games and all kinds of other spheres do this, where they have a niche, like even like shoe companies like Converse's, they make a particular kind of shoe. But board game publishers really have their own particular niches. And the Level 99 Games niche is, we are serving a niche audience. Every single one of our games is a niche audience game, but the niche is big enough that they can actually sell it and stock it in stores. But at least in my experience, what I've seen, many of the people who buy any given Level 99 game or play it 3 times and they're like, I'm getting rid of this because it's not a game for me. But then the 5% of people are like, this is my favorite game and I will never play anything else. And you are hard pressed to find other publishers who can put out games that consistently do that, which is a really interesting thought experiment. I've played maybe 6 of their games so far, and 0 of them I love because they all fall into the same sort of brain space for me, which I don't like. Anyway, now I'm rambling about Level 99 Games, but
I really like their games. I like all their games. My problem is I really have a hard time finding people who also feel the same way about that game. I think that's my struggle with like even BattleCon. I love BattleCon. Finding someone who wants to sit down. I have one friend who will sit down and we played through every character. And,
that's the thing about Level 99. It's hard
it's not
to
casually
teach
acceptable.
New people. Exactly. Yeah. It's
because
really
BattleCon
hard to get
takes
new
a
blood.
hot second to get through, and the first few games aren't necessarily fun because they take so long. And like you said, it doesn't feel like a fighting game because it's a very zero-sum back and forth. That it's like the slowest motion fighting game.
Exactly. Which is why I was so excited about it, because I can't keep pace with actual fighting games. Like more recently I did try again and get into competitive Smash Ultimate, and eventually I had to put it down because I got to a point where I was like, my hands literally can't keep up with teenagers because I'm an old fogey now.
That game is wild.
Oh my god.
Melee was fine for me. Like I thought I was pretty good at it. Ultimate, I'm like, this is too much. I can't process it.
The thing about Ultimate is that from a game design standpoint, it's like a miracle happened. The fact that there's 90 characters, and after the first few patches where they fixed some egregious errors, it's like, here, have this 90 character fighting game where every single character is balanced. And it's like, what? How? I don't understand. Even just looking at BattleCon, like BattleCon has like over 50 characters, and there's like 6 that are banned in tournaments, right? Something like that, 6 or 7.
I don't know what the new one is because they just released, but they rebalanced everyone.
Oh.
So like the new boxes that have all the new characters, like when I did the Ultra whatever collector's pack, they sent cards for every character in the game. So I literally reprinted every single character that had been released. They tweaked them in some way. And so I have 2 copies of every character in the game because I had the games already. I'm like, what do I do with these? I don't know.
So the set that I had was the big 30 character set, Devastation of Indites. And in the rule book, it literally said in the FAQ, it's like normal question stuff. And it's like, hey, the puppet's ability is way too strong. Like he has the 4 things that shut off the different phases. You know what I'm talking about? I forget the character. Ares?
There's a couple. No,
I don't know. Anyway,
anyway.
It's the sort of thing where spend a token, now like end of turn things don't happen. And one of them was way too strong through playtesting. I had never played the character before, but I saw this note of community asking, hey, can we change it so this token doesn't work on both of these things and just one of them? Because it shut off start of turn and end of turn. And they were like, shutting off start of turn stuff is too strong. Can we skip that? And the rulebook just said, yep. And so it was just eroded in the rulebook through the FAQ. And so that character, I think, was banned in tournaments. The Gravity Lady and someone else, I forget. The third guy. Oh, Sword Guy. The guy with the floating swords. I forget the names of the characters. The character design is awesome in that game. Except, outside of it being all white fit people, the character design is awesome.
Yeah, I think the newer expansions have some characters of color. I never dug into the lore, so I can't for sure say what the representation totally is, but they are all very pretty fit people. I don't know. I think they have made conscious decisions to try to make it inclusive.
Yeah. So this actually leads into the other thing I was looking for in a fighting game experience, which was a diverse cast or a character that I could specifically identify with. And there just weren't any. So I made one instead. I made a cast of characters.
You have to. That's one of the questions now is where do you see yourself in board games represented? or do you see yourself represented in board games? Like, do you have any on your shelf that you're like, yes, I see myself in this?
Interesting. This is an interesting thought experiment. Let me plumb through the depths of my board game knowledge. I have a lot of board games. I have too many. I don't have 200. I did see that was one of the episode titles. I don't have 200 board games. But I think I'm at almost 100 at this point. So let me see. I think that if I were to like pick one that is closest to me being represented, it is actually the Legend of Korra Pro Bending Arena board game, because Korra
designed by Alara Cameron, who is trans.
Yes, and Sen-Foong Lim, who is awesome. What a great dude. Oh my god.
I had Alara on as a guest, and we talked a lot about how awesome Sen was.
Oh my god. I need to go listen to that episode.
It's not out yet. You can't.
Oh, I can't. Oh no. I haven't talked to Alana in a while. I need to catch up with them. So if I think about what character can I feel represented by the most, it's probably Korra, because she's a strong queer woman and it's trans goals. Also, just like the control of all four elements is a trans goal of mine. That's like the most goal I have is.
I didn't finish Korra. Is she canonically queer?
Oops. Spoiler alert.
No,
yes, it's a spoiler for a cartoon that's 8 years old now. But yes, canonically queer and canonically in a relationship with Asami. It is established in the last season, and then set after the show ends, there's graphic novels, and in the graphic novels, it's not implied. It is specifically shown. Here is their lovey-dovey relationship, and here's them vacationing together, and here's them saying I love you and kissing on screen, quote unquote on screen, except it's in the graphic novels. But yes, oh yeah, they are an item, and it's real cute.
Talk to me about, so you mentioned a game that you have that you see yourself in, but that's one. So talk to me about your journey of creating a game that has a whole, what's the word?
A queer ensemble.
Yes, that's perfect.
An ensemble of diversity. So a lot of it was the sort of queer ensemble came about. Like, people have asked me a bunch of times, hey, which of these characters is you? Because you write what you know, which of these characters is you? And I'm like, all of them, actually. So to clarify, because we're talking voice. So in Fight Sequence, right now, there are 6 characters that have art. 5 of them are going to be in the first set, and then we're about to get a 7th character for the next set too. So in this set of 5 characters, we have a short, overweight, bisexual man. He's a bear, basically. Not a literal bear, but a bear in the queer sense. And so we have the short, fiery, redhead bear guy. And then we have the tall, aloof angel lady who she has selective mutism and she's aromantic and ace. And then we have the lean, cool kid, non-binary kid, psychic kickboxer who is non-binary and pan. There is the trans kid who uses a wheelchair, so like visibly disabled, visibly trans, goes topless to show off his top surgery scars thing. And then the 5th one is like quiet, demure, quietly projecting confidence, light shadow assassin kind of character. And all 5 of these characters have a different skin tone and a different personality and different height and all this other stuff. And so I'm non-binary and I wanted to write a non-binary character. I'm autistic. I wanted to write an autistic character. And so that's the fiery bear character, is the universe's version of autism. The angel lady as well, Alexandra, the angel lady as well. I figured in retrospect, I could probably use the characters' names, whatever.
It helps.
So, yes.
People don't have visuals.
So Gregor is the short bear guy who's canonically written to be like some overlap with autism. Alexandra is the tall angel lady as well. Selective mutism often goes hand in hand with autism. And I don't have a visible disability, but I wanted to have someone on the cast who had a disability of some kind. The easiest way to do that, represented in a visual medium, is a visual disability. And it really taught me a lot about how to get people to be on the same page, as understanding where people are coming from in terms of disabilities, and like how to speak respectfully about visual disabilities and stuff like that. So it was as much a learning experience for me as well as for other people. But the main reason I wanted to do this, outside of getting myself represented in games, was just getting people in general represented in games. Because I saw so many games that were representing a portion of the population, the same portion, the same overlap. Like we talked about, BattleCon is like almost entirely fit white people. It's like there are more people than that in the world. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants to see change.
Very similar story where my first game I designed, it's just filled with characters, and the art's not made for it yet, but I put in that many characters so I could have all these different body types and ethnicities and gender identities. And I want them to all look very beautiful and strong and powerful. That's the thing too. That doesn't mean fit or
But does not
fully not disabled. That it just means that they are powerful.
Able-bodied.
As they are. Yes,
abled for short.
Abled. The able.
But yeah. We're on the same page there. Yeah, it stemmed from wanting to display aspects of myself in game, and quickly shifted into wanting to display humans in games. And so that is the quest. That is what the beautiful blossoming tree has blossomed into, is just trying to represent as many aspects of being a human as possible. And yeah, and then part of it is also metaphorical. So Alexandra is a tall angel lady who has big giant wings, and the wings are a metaphor, and I won't get into it now. And then Zephyr is the kid who uses the wheelchair and is trans. And I worked with the artist to very specifically give him deer antlers as opposed to stag antlers, to further represent and like a nod to the coming out experience and the trans experience, and how being trans doesn't necessarily mean you have to discard all of the aspects of your body and yourself. There's more of a pick and choose element. So like someone who, what's a good example? A friend of mine who is a trans man who did not get top surgery because he was like, oh no, I love my boobs. I'm going to keep my boobs. I don't want to do top surgery, but I'm going to do all the other stuff. And he's very happy. And so it's looping back to our conversation about expectations. There's this sort of expectation of you are trans, so you are doing all the stuff clearly, but that's not the case. You don't have to do that.
No, see? I love that. Yeah. And here's a question for you that I'm going to phrase it combatively, not intentionally combatively, but would you say, if someone said, do you honestly think people won't buy it because do you think more people won't buy it because of the representation, or do you think people will buy it regardless because it's a good game, but also more people will buy it because they just see themselves in it? What do you think is the...
So I hope first and foremost that people buy it because it's a good game, of course. And I've been developing it long enough that I no longer feel anxious about that. I know it's a good game. It's a good game. Of course, it's not a game for everyone because no game is, but it is a good game. I honestly do hope that a subset of people don't buy it because of the representation, because those are not people I want to make games for or play games with anyway. If they're like, this cast is too diverse, this cast has too many people of color, and I'm uncomfortable and I don't want to play it. Good. We don't want you in the community if you're going to do that. By that, I mean the fight sequence community or the board game community at large. And I feel a little bit comfortable speaking for everyone when I say that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I'm trying to challenge in these conversations, is people listening who, if we don't have enough white people in it, are we not going to be able to sell it to the white people?
Yeah, and it's just like in like the sex sells thing, where like, oh, we want to market this to teenage boys, so we have to have a sex sells element. I actually just had a conversation with someone about this in the Break My Game community. They sent me a DM the other day because they were like, oh, I checked out your site and I saw the characters and that was really cool. And they asked me a similar question. Let me see if I can go find the thing real quick. I was talking about how I specifically made everyone queer. People are visibly queer. Like I make art celebrating Pride every year. I still am waiting on this year's Pride art. It's a little late, but whatever. And so I like, it is not a secret that the cast is queer. And a lot of it is to represent myself and other queer people in games and other diverse cultures in games. And the other part of it from the other angle is to specifically dissuade homophobic and transphobic and racist people from playing the game. And so someone asked me, like, in this conversation I was having, it's like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. But I wonder, without objecting to it, of course, like, what's the reasoning behind hoping to disinterest phobic people from purchasing the game? And I was like, if you want to spend money on the game, if you want to give me money, even though you're homophobic or transphobic, then that's fine. That's your prerogative. But I will not entertain anyone being a jerk in my community about it. And if that means you're going to boycott my company and my games, that suits me just fine. Because I don't need your support if you're going to be a jerk about it. So I am okay with when the TTS debacle rolled up, like it back in January and all that stuff was going down. I made the announcement on the Discord that I'm boycotting TTS. I'm taking fight sequence off of TTS. And TTS at that point was the way I was getting the most organic traffic. I already had like over 100 subscribers. Like there were almost as many subscribers on TTS that I didn't know at all than I had on my mailing list at the time. And I was like, I am okay with losing this audience if it means that everyone in the community is comfortable and safe. That's what's more important to me. I don't want to make $100,000 and have a bunch of jerks in my community. I would much rather make $20,000 and have a community where I want to interact with everyone and everyone feels the same.
Yeah. When you read that, I was like, in my head, I was like, yeah, it's the community aspect. Absolutely. Nobody that I've talked to is in this industry to make a ton of money. Not one person is like, yeah, I want to be rich.
Yeah.
And specifically on this podcast, I think literally every person is like, I just want other people to feel safe. Has been a universal goal of everyone I've talked to. So I think that's first and foremost is we want people to feel safe. And then I would like to be successful in the sense that I want success so that I can advocate more effectively. Like me advocating right now, no one knows who I am. Basically shouting into an empty void, being like, I want representation, but
representation now.
Part of my goals is I need to establish myself so that my words mean something to people who aren't just already in my corner because they're queer or whatever. Like we connect on whatever personal level. Yeah, I'm hoping other queer creators also find that success in just doing what they do. Because I don't know, people need to see that we have value beyond just like making games for each other. I think we have value, like our stories, our identities have value. They resonate with people beyond our circles too. Like it's not a bad marketing decision to listen to queer creators, get them involved and put them in your games.
You would think that would be common sense, but alas.
It's also tough because I just had to cancel my Kickstarter because we didn't have the momentum. I don't know that had anything specifically to do with me being very visibly queer on there. But even Stonewall wasn't like, I wouldn't call it a breakout success. I think it did well for like how niche. It's a historical game about specifically a queer moment in history. So I wouldn't call it like a mass market title. But yeah, I'm not seeing like queer-centered games getting the same amount of traction. But also there's less of us. It's trying to tip the scale. And I know that it can be done because there's a lot of queer media that is dominating in Netflix and HBO and like pretty much every streaming platform. People resonate with the queer characters and storylines. Like it's universal. And for some reason, trying to advocate in the board game space is very tough. People don't see it as a selling point.
I think this might just be the bubble that I'm in. But the thing that I see is so many designers and community leaders want it. And it's taking a while for publishers to get on board. That's really the thing. And the publishers is the stopgap. But literally everyone else wants it. I think we're almost done applying enough pressure. And also there's a thing that I actually want to mention, looping back to the thing about being successful. This is actually something that we talked about. So I'm on the Building the Game podcast, which is a documentary podcast. Jason Slingerland runs it. And I'm one of the rotating co-hosts. In the episode that I was most recently on, we talked a lot about success and what that means. It's really important to know that you get to define success however you want, in a similar way that you get to define being trans as however you want. And success might mean funding on Kickstarter and making $100,000 so you can get your game in the hands of all these straight people and teach them that queer lives have value. And being successful might mean just having this podcast be listened to by 10 more people than did before and stuff. And so you get to define those goals. People who are listening, and also you, Maxwell.
No, for sure. Yeah, I think my goal is just to be able to shift something. I just want to know that something has shifted, even if it's not directly due to my actions. That's the goal. Wherever I need to get to make that happen, I guess is a stop on the way to making a difference. So it's one of those moving targets, perhaps. But I'll keep doing stuff until it's like, oh, hey, we should probably listen to this person.
Yeah. Ideally, it's like you hit the target and then you move it again. That's my goal with goals.
And then you shift a little further.
Yes.
Yeah.
I almost made a fight sequence joke there, and then I realized nobody would have any idea what I'm talking about. So in fight sequence, you build sequences of actions, and everyone is psychic in the thing. So you're building the sequences and they resolve in reverse. And one of the main hooks of the game is that you aren't just building sequences, you're also maneuvering it, like you're moving the pieces. And so the main way you do that is with shifts. And so shifting is very common in fight sequence. It's a thing that happens.
Yes, that would have been a very specific joke. You're correct.
A niche audience for both the joke and the game.
Yes, but hey, anyone listening to this episode probably would have got it, to be fair.
The best jokes are ones you explain anyway, so
That's
now
my motto.
Listen, I have a degree in comedy. I know what I'm talking about. I graduated from improv school. I know what's up.
What a goal. I think the only other question I have, is there anything you're seeing in the industry now that's giving you hope in terms of inclusion and representation and that we're moving in the right direction?
Super yes. It's a bunch of disparate pieces where I am very excited to say one of the characters in fight sequence is clearly openly expressed non-binary throughout the game, and they're going to be on the cover of the game. And I'm even more excited to say that I am not the first game that's going to have a queer non-binary person of color on the cover of the game. Thank you,
No?
Artisans of Splendent Vale. Very excited to play that game. So that is one example of many of games and prototypes that I'm seeing recently that are caring more, and not everyone is getting it right, but many people are trying to. And that is the very best first step that you can do. Is just try. To loop back to that example I gave, this person tried and really failed hard. Please don't be afraid to try. The thing that I would ask you to fear is not being open to learning from mistakes. Please try to be better at representation if you care about that. And also please care about that. But then if you mess it up and people are like, this isn't... So here's an example. So Zephyr uses a wheelchair. And I used to say in his description on the website that he is in a wheelchair. And someone who uses a wheelchair in real life messaged me and was like, we generally don't like terming it like that because it makes it, the wheelchair isn't a part of me. It's just a tool that I use that helps me. And I said, yes. Thank you for telling me. And now I've adjusted it and that's much better. So don't fear being wrong. Just fear closing out the correctness, I guess, is what to say. The other thing that gives me hope in like a broader sense is just the amount of other designers that I am seeing that are like, this is a thing that I care about too. And just the number of times people are like, yeah, so I started freelancing as a diversity consultant and now I can't take any more appointments because I have too many appointments. Yes. Excellent. You getting that work, like perfect. That's the thing that I want to see. And I've seen 3 or 4 friends of mine that are like, I put myself out there and now I just never not have work, which is cool. So yeah, all of this is going to take a few years to like germinate. But I anticipate when we're looking at like the 2025 batch of Kickstarter games, it's going to be on par with the cartoons that we're seeing for kids that are like all about the queer people and diversity and stuff like that. So I have many pieces of hope. If you look at a game shelf right now, it's a little dry for us, but I think in 5 years' time, that's going to be much less the case.
And you'd definitely be able to speak to this, is I see a ton of queer designers in online playtest groups. Like specifically Break My Game is like a specific one where it's like, oh, I know I'm going to be probably in a group with at least one other queer person.
Yep.
And I expect that when I go there. I don't know, like you said, I'm not necessarily seeing their games being mass produced yet, but I'm excited for them to be as well.
Yeah. And in Break My Game, even like half of the moderator, admin, event host staff, like half of us are queer. And also we're both mentors in the tabletop mentorship program. I'm also a mentee. I don't know if you are too, but like when you can opt to help select mentees by reading their responses to stuff. And so there are 500 people that signed up for mentees. And I narrowed it down to 128 based on what my interests were. And more than half of the people were like, I would prefer being mentored by a queer person, or I'm a queer person, so I need my mentor to be okay with that. And I'm like, yes, more of the army is growing. This is the queer agenda. The queer agenda was just make games. Not the downfall of society. It's the downfall of white people in games. Or I guess white people taking up the majority of character slots in games.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's inevitable. Like, if there's enough of us, and I think seeing a person like that as a moderator in a position where it makes me feel safer knowing that there's a queer person who has stepped up and said, I'm comfortable stepping in for you. That's great. That's amazing. And I expect that of every moderator then, just by association, that they will also step in. So I don't have to feel like I'm going to have to go in and justify myself ever.
Yeah, one of the rules of Break My Game is respect people's pronouns. Not doing so is against the rules of the server.
Absolutely.
Any of you that are feeling down, feeling like you're alone in the queer space, come to Break My Game. Check out the tabletop mentorship program. It's too late to sign up for this session, but the community is popping with queer people. Tabletop mentorship program. It's real great and it's free. And you can stay up to date on when to sign up for the next one. Break My Game, also free. There's no like membership fee or anything. Come hang out with all the queer designers. It's a good time.
Yeah. I think final question, how do I find you, support you? How do I get my hands on this super queer fighting game? That's awesome.
Fight sequence. It doesn't exist in paper yet. I'm hoping, very cautiously, optimistically, kickstarting in October. Almost certainly not going to be the case, but I have my fingers crossed. Probably going to be early next year. So technically I am on a bunch of social media, but actually the thing I'm being mentored on is how to not have an anxiety attack every time I open social media. A little dry on content right now, but on Instagram I am at Triple Rainbow Games. On Twitter, same thing except triple won't fit. So it's at 3x Rainbow Games on Twitter, Triple Rainbow Games, or the Fight Sequence group on Facebook, although Facebook I might just delete. So Instagram, Twitter, Discord is the big one, and you can find an invite to the Fight Sequence Discord server on the website, which is triplerainbow.games or fightsequence.com. They'll both bring you there. Sign up for the mailing list. We'll alert you via mailing list and social media and the Discord announcement and smoke signals and carrier pigeons and everything else we can think of when the game is launching or at least close. Discord is the way to go. If you're going to pick one way, hop in the Discord server. I'm actually active there, and you can see all the sweet art and hear me talk about Fight Sequence multiple times a week and play demos online and stuff. If you go on Tabletopia, you can play an old version of the prototype. If you go on screentop.gg, you can play a newer version of the prototype demo there. And yeah, I think that's all the places that you can find me. Yeah, it's a lot of places. Yeah. I'm also a moderator of Protospiel. So if you go to Protospiel online, I'm one of the moderators and an event host there. I'm a moderator of Break My Game, and I volunteer with Unpub. So if you're ever at an Unpub or Nunpub event, I will be there as well.
You're just doing all the things.
We're doing all the things. Listen, I super love board games, and I super love helping other designers. That's like my favorite thing in the world other than Fight Sequence. Close second is helping everyone else.
Yeah, and I don't know for sure, Unpub is probably more directed at designers who are looking to get eyes on their games, but regardless, both of those, Protospiel online or in person, and then Unpub online or in person, they're both open to people who just want to try out new games that are probably digital. They might have a prototype if it's an in-person event, but you can just try out a game that's not out yet, and people will teach it to you and ask for your feedback. You do not have to be a designer. In fact, I love getting people who are not designers playing games because I get
we love
different
play
kind
testers.
of feedback.
If you are just a playtester and not a designer, you are more valuable than gold, and we love you.
Yes,
please
absolutely.
play test games. It's so cool.
We'll celebrate you. We will thank you. Say nice things to us or not. Give us honest feedback. That's what we want. That's what we want.
Yes, honesty's the key.
Thank you so much for coming on my little podcast.
Thank you for having me. Oh, this was so fun.
Absolutely.
I didn't expect to just come in and like vent about queer stuff for an hour and a half. This is cool.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we're here for.
Heck yeah.
As a disclaimer, I just want to remind everyone that we're just a couple of queer folks. We do not speak for the entire LGBTQI+ community, nor are we trying to. The best way to be an ally is just to keep learning, listening, and remember that we're all just trying to figure it out together. That's all I have. If you're listening, know that you're loved and perfect, just the way you are. And until next time, bye.
Bye.